Good morning, all. Welcome to our webinar on Sovelia Vault. And it's great to see so many people on this webinar this morning, and it's great to see so much interest on this particular webinar as well. For those that may not know me, my name is Ray O'Mahony. I'm Technical Manager here within Symetri Ireland. My purpose here today is really kind of to introduce Adam. Adam's really taken the product ownership around Sovelia Vault. But before we really go into the presentation and the technical demo in essence, I'd just like to discuss why we're having this webinar this morning and what's the purpose and where's the fit for Sovelia Vault. Many of you probably are aware already and had numerous discussions with both Adam and I and the team in relation to Sovelia Vault and product data management. How do we manage our files today versus what we need to do tomorrow? One of the things that we really need to consider here is to get the most out of our PDM solution. So how do we manage our files and how we share our files, how we collaborate our files more effectively to the wider business areas. PDM is a small piece of the puzzle. In this case, Autodesk Vault is a small piece of the puzzle in relation to how we manage our data. We need to look outside the box, look outside that silo of information and how we share that effectively. How do we approve files more effectively? How do we set up automated workflows to share information to other departments, which I've just already really said. But not only that, not just other departments, not just other areas like quality, but also manufacturing. And we need to consider how we manufacture, produce, approve our files. And we need to, in certain cases, look outside the box and look at our tools that we've developed in order to cater for those particular business requirements. So really today, we are focusing on people that are new to Vault or existing customers that want to kind of get more out of what they have already and achieve more with their current solution. And to be honest with you, it's not a very big step to do. And we've put a lot of focus and energy behind this particular functionality, which is essentially an add-in for Vault. And it's really around showing and showcasing the benefits of having a solution like this to complement your current PDM workflow within the organization. So today, you'll see on the webcam, Adam, my colleague, has joined. So I'm going to do a quick introduction to Adam, if you don't mind. So Adam's been part of the Symerti team for a while now at this stage, 4 years and plus, right? But has many years experience working with Autodesk Vault, PDM solution within a regulated environment. And that's key to a lot of this as well. We do implement Vault within a regulated environment. We validate the system, we do SOPs, we do, again, showing what the procedures are around sharing information, around generating third-party files to work in other areas of the business. So this is one of the key areas that Adam's been. He's got a lot of industrial experience around that. Has experienced firsthand the benefits of Autodesk Vault in this case within a very tightly regulated environment where the flow of information is key, how it's flowed, how it's approved, and how it's shared out to the business areas is critical. So he's firsthand experienced that, and I'm delighted that he's really taken on this product as well and sees the benefits of this product. So a lot of the time, both Adam and I are involved in big projects, PDM projects essentially, and we've implemented Sovelia Vault in many of those projects, the two of us. And now this has really grown legs for us, and customers can see the benefit of what the solution can provide on top of the current PDM workflow. I'm talking about PDM quite a lot, and I mentioned talking about acronyms and so forth. So product data management, PDM, Autodesk Vault, the data management solution that does that PDM exercise within the business, and then Sovelia Vault, which is an add-in on top of that. So without further ado, I'm going to stay stumped for a while. I'm going to hand over to my colleague Adam, which I'm delighted. And Adam's is probably the senior product manager for Sovelia Vault within Symetri. So he's a lot of experience already implementing, a lot of experience in demoing and showcasing this product to customers. So I'm looking forward to this presentation. I hope you will too. So Adam, without further ado, I hand it over to you and best luck.
Thanks, Ray. I appreciate it. Thanks for the kind introduction. Hopefully you can all hear me okay. Just before I plow into the presentation itself, Orla just asked me to mention, if any of you were previously following ProCAD on LinkedIn, please take a look for Symetri Europe. That's where you'll see updates for our upcoming webinars and so on and so forth as well. And also just while Ray is here, Ray will be keeping an eye on the questions. So if anyone has any questions, there's a questions option there where you can post into the chat. Ray will keep an eye on those, and he might come back in and we'll go over some questions at the end if we have time. Shouldn't take the full hour. I haven't really aimed for the highest limit in terms of time, so we'll get through this presentation, we demonstrate the product briefly, and we'll do some questions at the end if there are some there from you. So, first, just before I start to talk about Sovelia Vault, which is our Symetri own product, I just want to give kind of a summary of Autodesk Vault Professional. So I had the challenge of trying to compress that onto maybe just one slide. So maybe a small bit difficult because Vault Professional is quite a beast of an application. Very comprehensive product data management solution, PDM, as Ray mentioned. So with Autodesk Vault Professional, some of the key features which I've bullet pointed here are things like revision control, which is where you go through a full life cycle with your files. You're going from work in progress, the design phase to the work in progress phase, right through to approval and release to production or master phase, depending on your company. Version history is more keeping a record of all changes that occurred on a file. So rather than talking about the full approval workflow, we're looking at more smaller changes, stuff like when a file is moved from one location to another, a file is renamed, property is updated on that file, or if a file is checked out, modified, and checked in a CAD application and checked back into your Vault. All of those are file versions. Approval processes, some of you will be familiar with the change order process, your ability to send your files in batch to an approver, a lead engineer in your company. They will approve your drawings, and that's when your drawings become released or master files. So you're using the approval process to ensure that files are reviewed before they are released. Traceability, similar to version history, but what I mean by traceability is who made changes. You know, being able to see those changes in a history, and being able to account for what changes were made. So things like adding comments when you're checking in files, things like if someone moves a file from one folder to another, you have the ability to see when that was done, who did it, a lot of that stuff that's kind of a little more difficult to extrapolate when you're working in, say, just a shared network folder environment. Exposing file links. I should mention the screenshot I have here on the right side of this slide. For those of you who've moved to Vault 2023 in the last couple of months, you might be aware that there are new skins on the Vault, so you can see that I've the dark filter on this particular screenshot. Good for those of you who are working full-time on a single screen. Looking at a screen all day long, essentially, I find it's good to relieve eye strain. Anyhow, as I was saying about exposing file links, we just have an inventor assembly here, top level, and you can see all of the parts that make up that assembly in the screenshot. So this is something you can do with Autodesk Vault. You can look at it, and this works for XREF AutoCAD drawings as well. So you can look at a top level drawing, and you can see all of the drawings that are XREF'd into that file, or like an inventor, you can look at an assembly and you can see all of the parts that are used in making up that assembly, even if those parts are in different folders. And you can just simply right click on one of those parts and go to that folder. And the reverse is also the case. You can take a part and see how many assemblies that part has been used in within your Vault. So this kind of stuff, again, can't be done in a standard shared network drive. And last bullet point I've mentioned here, and again, these are just the key features of Autodesk Vault, is CAD integration. So you see the ribbon tab here, the Vault tab on your ribbon at the top of AutoCAD and Inventor and all the various Autodesk products. And even some of the competitor products, this is available with SolidWorks. And you'll see this ribbon also at the top of the likes of Microsoft Word and Excel and PowerPoint and so on as well. So once you implement Vault, you have the ability to do a lot of your work from within the CAD application, streamlining your workflow quite a bit, saving you time. You know, you can open from the Vault without navigating to the Vault, and you can perform a lot of the tasks that you would inside the Vault directly from the Vault ribbon also. So you've options there in terms of keeping your workflow seamless and smooth. So that's Autodesk Vault. I'd just like to introduce you to the Symetri owned solutions. So those of you who are aware, we were formerly ProCAD, we've been absorbed by Symetri. We're now we're now going to talk about some Symetri products that we have, I suppose, inherited since we became part of the Symetri bracket. So the main one we're going to talk about today, which is the one on the top left of this slide, is the Sovelia Vault. But just for any of you that do any Googling or anything after this webinar, if you look up Sovelia, you'll find there is actually an entire portfolio of Sovelia products. So we have the likes of Sovelia Engineering, Sovelia PLM, which is a product lifecycle management system, Sovelia Configurator for setting up a configuration that, you know, the customer could pull from some drop downs and configure one of your products to suit their needs. Sovelia Visualizer, my colleague Craig recently gave a webinar on this, which explores AR and VR. Sovelia Routing and Sovelia Tool. Sovelia Routing is kind of an add-on for Inventor. It improves the Inventor tubing and piping workflows. Sovelia Toolkit on top of Inventor. My colleague Sid is actually giving a webinar on both of these later in the month, so keep an eye out for that. Check out our LinkedIn page if you want to find links for that there as well. And Sovelia AutoCAD as well. So large portfolio of products, but today we're just going to focus on Sovelia Vault. So Autodesk Vault Professional plus Sovelia Vault. So just to kind of summarize and maybe lay it out in plain English, Autodesk Vault Professional is our PDM solution. It's our product data management solution. As a lot of you are already familiar with it, it's kind of like a Windows Explorer looking environment. You have a folder tree down the left, you have your files in the center, you may have your properties or your preview on other windows that are added to the main window itself. So again, it's just much like Windows Explorer. It's easy to navigate. It's fairly straightforward to understand, but it has it's powerful and it has a huge amount of functions that wouldn't be available to you in the basic Windows Explorer environment. Stuff like your revision control and stuff that I mentioned a little earlier. So Sovelia Vault, what is Sovelia Vault? Well, Sovelia Vault is an automation tool. It really turns Vault Professional into a bit more of a malleable platform, meaning that we can actually create and enforce workflows of our own by automating, setting those up with Sovelia and making sure that all of our Vault client users are following those workflows. And they have some additional functionalities available to them, which we'll go through here today as well. So just briefly to maybe just talk about a typical workflow, just so it makes it maybe a little easier to understand some of the actions that will occur as we go through a workflow. So typically we might start with, and this is just an example workflow, typically we might start with our drawing. We might start in the work in progress stage. We may need to submit just to a check. So we just have a check state set up in the Vault. Not everybody uses the check state. Some people go straight to the review stage, but check state is available in Autodesk Vault also. And when that check state occurs, we might have something like we might require something like an email notification. And this is something we can do with Sovelia Vault. We can trigger emails that go to someone to come in and check this particular file. Similarly, the same occurs when we submit for approval. Now, some of this is built into the change order workflow already, but if you were to work outside of the change order workflow, you'll know that there's no means to enforce that people get notified to log in and approve a drawing. So we can set up emails for that also. We might also need to submit for external review. So that might require creating a PDF of a drawing file, attaching that PDF to an email and submitting that out for external review to a relevant person who may not be part of our office network. After the approval, we push to release. And when we push to release, this is where actually a larger amount of the actions that we're going to be talking about will occur. Stuff like we might send an email to inform production department or your manufacturing shop floor that a certain file has been released. It's now been released to production and it needs to be physically produced on the shop floor. So at this point, we have triggers that will create external file formats. So stuff like PDFs and DXFs, step files, IGES files, the various file formats that may be needed to load into, say, like a laser cutting machine to actually go and manufacture that part. And again, it could just be the case of producing a PDF and submitting it to someone to inform them that the file has been updated and approved. Next, we have the quick change state. Not everybody uses the quick change state either, but it is available in Autodesk Vault. And we also have, maybe if we use a quick change state, we may have the need to actually go and reproduce the PDF because we've made a change to the file to fix a typo or something simple like that. So it's making a change without the need for the approval process, if that's part of your workflow. And the final state then is the obsolete state. Typically, if a file is no longer in production, we might move it to obsolete, and we may need to watermark it. You might apply a plot stamp, something like obsolete, across the front of the sheet drawing to let anyone who opens that file aware that that file is obsolete if it's not already obvious from the Vault client application to those users. So with this workflow, there actually are a lot of surrounding workflows. So like I've already mentioned, you have your production. They may need a bill of materials. They may need secondary file formats so that they can load them into cutting machines and so on and so forth. You have suppliers. Maybe you need to trigger emails and send notifications to suppliers. You have maybe your ERP system, which is your enterprise resource planning system. You may be using that for stock management or work orders or so on and so forth. You may need to export a bill of materials on release of a file from Vault, and then that may need to get loaded into an ERP system. So we've got the real stepping stone for that with the Sovelia Vault application. After sales and service is another big one. A lot of companies now are moving to products as a service rather than selling your product to your customer and cutting ties there, and then you may be supplying your product and you may be doing aftercare with that product. There may be annual recalibration. There may be user manuals and service manuals that get provided. You may be providing spare parts for that to your customer. A lot of that, it needs to be considered as well. So you will have, so it is important as well. So just, this will be the first time I go through some bullet points on what functions are available with Sovelia Vault. And we'll go through some of these in a bit more detail in slides further along. First of all, property manipulation. So property manipulation is something we can do to a certain extent in Vault, but let's say we wanted to automate that. So say, for instance, we wanted to set it so that if a file is changed to work in progress, that the author on that file is now the user who actually changed the state of that file. So we get that property written. That property can then be mapped back to, say, something like a revision table. So you're kind of working with electronic signatures here to a certain extent. You're ensuring that the username is written to a property, and that property could be written to something else, whether it's part of your data exports or part of a drawing list. Again, that property is automatically filled in. We also have the ability to clear properties, which is pretty huge. So when you go from a release stage to a work in progress stage, some of you will know that you need to go back through some of the file's properties and change them and update them. But we could actually automate that. We could clear all of those properties, and then the user will know that they need to refill in those properties for the next iteration, the next revision of that particular file. We have the 2 and 4 eyes check, which I'll mention in a moment. But essentially, with the 2 and 4 eyes check, this is a concept that's quite familiar in industry, whereby a user, essentially, it's a requirement that more than one user has to look at a file for that file to be approved. And we can kind of enforce that within Sovelia Vault also. Other functions, automation of inventor tasks and design checks, stuff like exporting certain file formats from your inventor model. We can run iLogic in bulk. Again, we'll kind of show some of this as we go. Bill of material extraction for an ERP system. So if we have a list of parts and assemblies and we finish and release those, we may need to release a bill of materials with properties. So, you know, your part number and other properties, how many of each of those parts you need. Maybe you might have price and vendor and so on attached to some of those as well. Excuse me. Generating of other file formats. So again, when we release a file, we may need to trigger the creation of a PDF, the creation of a DXF for a laser cutting machine, the creation of a step file to send to another client or so on, and creation of maybe something like a 3D PDF. And of course, there are other file formats available. Anything you need, we could take a look at if it's not already there in the drop-down list within the package itself. CAD automation and batch editing, these kind of go a little bit hand in hand, but suppose with CAD automation and batch editing, just consider, say you have a vault with 10,000 files and you want to write a script and you want to run that script on all of those files to modify those files. Similar with in a 3D model, you might have an inventor iLogic script that you've done up, and you might want to apply that to a bunch of files there as well. So we have the ability to kind of take a large quantity of files and modify them in bulk, and a lot of these tasks will just run on the job processor. So some of you will already be familiar with the Vault job processor, which I'll describe a little better in a moment. Background monitoring of the job processor. Those of you who are using the job processor already, the job processor is a client-side application that goes with Autodesk Vault. What it does is when you release a file, it will sometimes update the properties on that file, or it might create the file's preview, the visualization as it's called. And there's a couple of kind of tasks like that that will run on the job processor. A lot of the Sovelia Vault tasks will also be run on the job processor. So stuff like creating your PDFs and DXFs and exporting to maybe a shared network location for other departments and maybe sending those email notifications and so on. Now, a lot of these tasks can be done on demand via right-click menu as well. So you can just manually trigger some of these tasks, but I think the best workflow is to kind of build it into your lifecycle workflow. So these tasks will often get triggered as you change state and work your way through your lifecycle. And the last bullet point there is just to change state automated emails. So again, we can set up groups within the Vault, and we can email the relevant people in the relevant groups when certain files are changed. And you can set up rules that it goes to this group if the file is in one folder structure or folder set, and it goes to another group if it's in another. Or you can apply these based on categories if you're using Vault categories. There's a lot of options around automating these workflows. So just want to talk about the 4 eyes principle, maybe just to make you all understand it a little better. The 4 eyes check, or the 4 eyes principle, is a requirement that 2 individuals approve some action before it can be taken. Essentially, it just means that the person who created a drawing can't also be this person who approves the drawing, in essence. The 4 eyes principle is also sometimes called the 2-person rule. So just some bullet points on why people will implement the 4 eyes principle. The first bullet point here is probably the most common, and that is because it's a compliance standard or a regulatory requirement. So if you're following one of these compliance requirements like ISO 9000 or 9001, if you're in manufacturing, or GMP, which is good manufacturing practices, if you're in, say, pharmaceutical, you'll be following GMP practices. So essentially, you're forcing the application to ensure that certain internal workflows are met or certain regulatory requirements are met. Other key reasons we do something like this: human error. We all make mistakes. The fault is not on the human who's made the mistake, it's on the system that allowed him to make that mistake. So, you know, it is good to have something that blocks that person from making that mistake. Essentially, peer review. Someone is checking that other person's work. Knowledge sharing. This might be obvious, but if 2 people are going to look at a document, then knowledge is going to be shared because 2 people have discussed this document together. And shared responsibility, again, this is just making sure that it's maybe bad practice to have the person who's designing, creating the document, doing up the CAD, also being the person who's approving that same documentation. So that's why it's good to have a secondary approver, or a peer review, as we say. If you are implementing something like the 4 eyes principle, be prepared to hear this joke from all of your CAD users. I did do the 4 eyes check. I looked at it twice. So that's obviously not what we mean. We need 4 different pairs, 4 different eyeballs on the drawing or document. So the Vault job processor. Actually, before I jump into that, I just want to show off the 4 eyes principle. So if I just go back to my Vault, and I'm going to take this one here. Just as an example, what I have here is a drawing file, and if I scroll down on the right, I have a designer which is written as d.designer, and you'll see I'm logged into this Vault as Dave Designer. So what's going to happen here is, because this property has d.designer as the designer, this same person is not going to be allowed to approve this document. So very simply, if I go and right-click on this file and select change state, and if I try to change this to released and click OK, I will get a warning from Sovelia Vault. And what this is telling me is this drawing approver cannot be designer. So we have kind of set up this dialog, failure for the following reason, and then it's giving you this in a little bit more detail as part of how this is configured in the Sovelia Vault. So what it's saying is designer cannot equal the username, and the username is defined as the first character in the first name, followed by a full stop, followed by their last name. So that's why we're getting d.designer in my designer property, because that's what we've actually set it up to do. While my username is actually Dave Designer, which you can see in the bottom right. So you can actually kind of tweak some of that as well. So again, if I were to log out and log in as another user, I would be able to approve this document and move on with the workflow. So that's your 4 eyes check. Again, I'll just jump back in and we'll move on. So that's just your 4 eyes check, I suppose, in practice. And I'll go back to the application again towards the end just to show some other functionalities as well. So next I want to talk about the Vault Job Processor and the Sovelia Queue Job tool. So a lot of you will be familiar with the job queue in Vault. I'll just very quickly show you that also. So if I select Tools and go to Job Queue, what I'll get is a window like this one and a list of all the jobs that are in my job queue. Errors will show up in here, pending actions will show up in here, and when a job is complete by the job processor, the job will be removed from the job queue. So the job queue is a useful window to see what kind of automated actions are occurring in the background with Autodesk Vault. So what you get, something else you get with Sovelia Vault is the Sovelia Job Queue tool. And what this does is it allows a lot more functionality with the Autodesk Vault job queue. So we have things like streamlining the interface. It's just easier to read and interrogate and sort and see which server, if you have numerous vaults at play, you can see where these jobs are coming from. We have some color coordination and so on that makes it just a little bit more legible as well if you have large quantities of jobs in the task in the job queue. It's easier to filter and so on and so forth as well. On top of that, we have some useful functionalities. So for instance, we have the ability to clean up non-vital errors from the job queue. Some of you who've been working with Vault and the job processor may have heard of the non-tip errors. So a non-tip error is where if a file goes from work in progress to review and a job is created to update the properties on that file, and then that file immediately goes from review to released, an identical job is created to update the properties on that file again, in which case you get a non-tip error, which leaves an error line in your job queue. With Sovelia, we can actually just have it remove those particular jobs. On top of that, we can, so because they're not jobs that require someone to go in and interrogate, we'll say. On top of that, we have trigger email notifications from the job queue. So you could set it up that if errors appear in the job queue, that some Vault administrator is sent an email notification to say the following error appeared in the job queue, and then they're prompted to go into the job queue and check those errors. So this is quite useful because you'll know if you're a Vault administrator that keeping an eye on the job queue is a manual task or has been historically. Other useful functions, schedule restarts of the Vault job processor. On rare occasion, the job processor can get stuck and you can end up bottlenecking jobs into the Vault job processor while we're waiting for someone to realize that the job processor has gotten stuck. You're essentially building up a backlog of jobs. Or let's say a job in the job processor freezes, we can set up scheduled restarts that will prevent those kind of situations from occurring. Essentially, you could have it so that the job processor restarts at the end of the day every evening, and if jobs were ever stuck for any reason, it would just move on to the next job, and that particular job would just return an error. The last point we have here is we have the ability to generate reports and logs from our job queue. So again, you might want to send a weekly report to your job administrator, or to your Vault administrator, and that person will be able to say, well, why are we getting so many errors in the job queue? What's going on? We need to look at this. Or, you know, maybe they'll just get a nice tidy list of how many jobs did occur in the Vault job queue as well via the job processor. So, I suppose some of the most common requirements, and this will be the second time I go through some of the, I suppose, functions that Sovelia Vault has. Excuse me. And in this case, I'm just going to talk about them in kind of order of, I suppose, how common they are to our customers. So I suppose our most common requests from our customers when it comes to Sovelia Vault are secondary file formats, generating your PDF or your DXF or your step file and so on. Bill of materials export. So this is generating a bill of materials from an assembly. Property manipulation, like I said, stuff like clearing properties or updating properties on state change, automating those functionalities. And email notification is another big one as well, which is just alerting someone or some group of people that a file has been modified or a file state has changed. And you can set up rules for those again, as we said. It's very simple to configure. There's a small client-side add-in and there's an administrator user interface. So this can be applied to customers large and small. In the case of larger customers, you might have a central administrator or two administrators that kind of work on configuring these workflows, ensuring that these workflows are deployed out to all other users in the office. Or in smaller offices, you may have someone who's both making administrative changes via the Sovelia Vault configuration tool and also working within the CAD environment as well. So it really is quite scalable. And that brings me to my next point, scalability. We can, like I said, we've talked about the most common requests, but we can kind of take this further. We can create custom actions. We can set up iLogic rules. We can set up more or less whatever is required from your workflow. We can set it up to work within the Sovelia Vault application. Automatic triggers and manual triggers. I mentioned this already, but we'll discuss it more. Automatic triggers is where these actions occur after a file state is changed by a user, and manual triggers occur when a user simply right-clicks on a file, goes to a Sovelia Vault pull-down menu, and chooses for one of these actions to run. For instance, they right-click, go to Sovelia Vault, and go create DXF from a sheet metal part, and that will create a DXF file, and it may load that DXF file out to a shared network location, or it may save it directly back into the Vault. These are all configurable options in the Sovelia Vault configuration application. Controls, so we have profiles in here, which means we can set up different kind of setups for different user sets in our Vault. We have execute conditions, which is maybe a particular property value has to be entered or a property has to equal a particular value before the job will be executed. So we can set up these kind of rule restrictions on the jobs that we create. We have the job processor priority. Something worth mentioning is we can set up these jobs that certain jobs may take priority over others. So maybe you might want your creation of your file previews to be lower priority than your update of file properties or something along those lines. Or maybe you might want so that all drawings in a particular folder always take top priority and other jobs are taken after those. And that's really just around if you have a large quantity of jobs running through your job processor on a daily basis. And job processor management, I did mention the Sovelia QJob tool also. Just best practice, this is really a powerful tool when it comes to managing your different workflows, ensuring compliance checks are taken, and we have the audit logs on stuff like the job processor and so on, that we can send emails and keep a track of changes that occur within our Vault. So what you're seeing here on the screen right now is just a screenshot. In the background, we have Autodesk Vault, which I hope you're all quite familiar with. And in the foreground, we have the Sovelia Vault configuration tool, which I'll go through live in a moment. But just to give you your first glance at it, the administrators will be able to use this. As part of a Sovelia implementation, we will train users to use this application, but we'll also still support them as well. So, you know, if you have a requirement and you just can't figure out how to build that requirement within this configuration tool, by all means, you'll be able to reach out to us and we can assist, and we can even test if you have a workflow that maybe might be outside of what is obvious on this system. We can test it and make sure that it works and set it up for you. So I'll go through this application a little more shortly. So last time through, key features of Sovelia Vault: secondary file formats, which we've discussed, bill of materials extract, and this is via items from the CAD file properties if you're using just file properties in the Vault, or via iLogic. So those of you already using Vault will be familiar with either items versus file properties. If you're using items, you need to pull your bill of materials from items. If you're using files, your bill of materials will come from the properties on the files. And if you're pulling your inventor bill of materials, you could use the iLogic functionality to run through all of your assemblies and pull out the bill of materials. We can run iLogic rules with the Sovelia Vault application. Watermarking is probably one of our newer features. So applying a plot stamp across the front of a drawing to let someone who views a drawing know that that drawing is in a particular state. Model state control, this is relatively new. So the one thing I won't get into in detail today, but model states is a new enough feature of Autodesk Inventor, which allows you to have different states for your models. So if you have an assembly with, say, wheels on it, you might have two different model states with two different types of wheel sets on that assembly, or two different arm lengths on a particular component, and so on and so forth. So model state control is incorporated into Autodesk Vault 2023. It may have been so in 2022 as well. And model states are accounted for with Sovelia Vault now also. Property clearing, which we mentioned. You change the state of a file from release to work in progress. You might want a bunch of properties to get cleared out. We can set that up. Property updates. We may want particular properties to be updated automatically when certain workflows occur. Custom revision tables. Again, we do have kind of improved revision tables with Sovelia Vault, because we're automatically writing some of these properties to the files, preventing the need to manually write some of those properties from time to time as well, depending on your workflow. Other things we can pull out are drawing lists. You know, we can set up a template for a drawing list, pull it out based on a folder structure or a project within your Vault. Quite simple, quite straightforward. Email triggers, we mentioned already. Data cards, we get another window that allows us to preview the file properties in our own kind of shape and format. Event triggers and filters, again, this is all just around what causes these events to occur, and we can set it up so that it you know, for example, a user has to have a particular property entered before the PDF is created, or the DXF is created, or the bill of materials is exported. Custom jobs, we can set up our own custom jobs, have them run in bulk within your Vault environment. Our D2M tree connector, this refers to it's the application we have to link from Autodesk Vault to Autodesk's PLM system, Fusion 360 Manage. So that's what the D2M tree connector is for. So if you're linking both of those systems, you use that. We won't be covering that today because that's more of a PLM side application, or I suppose it's a link between PDM solution and the PLM solution, Vault being the PDM solution in this case. And the queue job tools, which I mentioned already, is just kind of the ability to keep an eye on your job queue, the ability to get notifications from your job queue, the ability to just streamline the navigation of your Vault job queue as well. So, as I say, we mentioned a lot of actions occurring, stuff like updating properties, stuff like creating a PDF, stuff like exporting a bill of material, exporting a DXF file format for a laser cutting machine and so on, or creating a DWG. We can even automate the process of creating an AutoCAD DWG from an Inventor DWG, stuff like that, which would be kind of a tedious and manual step with for a typical CAD user. So, I'm just going to briefly talk about action sets, and I kind of have already mentioned this. What it is you may not want a user, you know, go into a file, right click and go and create DXF, then right click and then select and create PDF, and then, you know, updating the properties and then exporting the bill of materials and all the various other tasks you may have set up in here. What you may do instead is set it up so that an action set occurs on, say, a state change. So when this file transitions from work in progress to release, or say from review to release, then all of these tasks will run, and they'll run in order as well. So order is quite important too. For instance, you want to update properties before you create, say, the DWG or the PDF, because updating properties may update a property that actually appears on the drawing in the title block or on a revision table. So obviously the order is important here as well. And we typically might want to do our bill of materials export at the end as well. So again, it's just making sure you understand the order that these tasks should occur in and set it up as per that order priority. So with Sovelia Vault, we can manage when tasks are run. We can prioritize tasks. We can run locally or via the job processor, as I said. We can group tasks, so we can group select files and run a task on all of those files in one go, and it'll add a bunch of tasks to the job queue. And we can run on state change or manually, and this helps us manage and enhance the tasks in our Vault workflow. So what does it work with? Well, pretty straightforward. Sovelia Vault works with Autodesk Vault Professional. It's an add-on for Autodesk Vault Professional. Unfortunately, it's not available with Autodesk Vault Basic, and Autodesk have started to discontinue Vault Workgroup, so we're moving away from that from now on. We have various parts and file formats. Again, all of these are available, and not just the ones you see listed here, but we have the ability to modify any file format. And those of you who are using Vault already will be aware that you can essentially check absolutely any file format into Vault. There's no restriction there. So, just something I want to discuss around the implementation of Sovelia Vault. It's quite simple compared to how we used to deal with some of these workflows historically. So, basically all you need is your licensing, your client-side installations, and a bit of training in this automation platform application. Historically, if a customer came to us and asked to set up some of these very same workflows, we would have had to maybe build a prototype. We may have had to set up a test server environment to actually demonstrate that prototype. We may have had to reiterate and reconfigure a number of times with the customer to get them to fully understand and trial and test that workflow. Programming knowledge was always required. You need someone to know how to interrogate PowerShell script files, XML files, XAML files for creating dialog boxes. And it's tedious if you need to make a change to something like that. With Sovelia Vault, it's a simple configuration tool. There's a huge amount of pull-down dialog boxes. You're just telling it where to pull properties from. It's straightforward and easy to configure, and it's easy to train an administrator how to use that application. And on top of that, migration to newer versions is made fairly straightforward because this Sovelia is tested on each version of Vault, whereas previously we may have had the need to set up a test environment between going from, say, Vault 2022 to Vault 2023. So it just makes that kind of annual maintenance a lot easier as well. And the configuration is saved directly into Vault, so your configuration is secure and saved and checked into the Vault application itself. So, getting close to the end here, I will jump out and show off one or two of the functions of the application, and I do see there's some questions coming in there, but I haven't read any of them as myself. Actually, I have some polls that I need to do as well, but before I do those, I just want to make some of you aware of how to get in touch, because as we moved away from ProCAD, we're now part of the Symetri bracket. If you go on our Symetri website, you'll find Sovelia Vault. If you go to symetri.ie, you'll get to the Irish homepage. If you want to book a call with us, you can email us at sales@symetri.ie. And if you want to email me directly about any of this Sovelia Vault stuff, if you want to set up a call or if you have questions, feel free to reach me at adam.murphy@symetri.com. Before I bring you back in for any questions we have, I just do want to actually demonstrate one more aspect of the product, and that's just some functionality occurring live and in real time. So we'll keep it fairly short, but if I take a part like this particular one, what we have is a sheet metal inventor part. It's currently in a work in progress stage, and what I want to do is just run some of my tasks. Now, before I do that, I'm just going to open the Sovelia Vault configuration tool just to show you this window, so that you get just kind of a quick understanding of what this actually looks like. So I'm just going to shrink everything down here to its simplest form, just so that it's kind of fully understandable. So what we have is a configuration window. Again, it's easy to train, and we will train anyone who's interested in implementing Sovelia Vault on how to use this and how to configure your own tasks and your own action sets and set it so those actions run when file states changes occur and so on. What we have here on the top couple of sections General settings, we apply some general settings. Action sets, I'll come back to action sets because I'll start with actions and custom actions. So actions are typically things like creating secondary file formats, exporting data, and updating properties. So we've kind of, our main actions are set in the action subdirectory. And you'll see if I go here to my inventor drawing, I have an action called create a PDF. And if I look down through my configuration options for creating a PDF from the inventor drawing, I have stuff like, how is this going to be executed? Do I have execution conditions? Is this going to be published to a network location? In this case, it is. It's going to go to Sovelia output. So this is my imaginary shared network drive location. Is it going to publish to Vault? Yes, it's going to go into the same folder as the source file. And then some advanced settings as well, like defer updates if you want to open a file and not update to the all the latest versions. For instance, with an assembly, you may have people working on other parts that haven't been approved yet. We have PDF settings, DPI settings, we have watermark options. So it's all quite very simple and straightforward, and a lot of stuff is just pull downs or yes, no values. And once you save this and apply it to your Vault, those functions become available to the Vault client user. So that's actions, custom actions. We have some more bespoke kind of actions that have been built in here. These have all been configured as per different requirements that have occurred with some of our customers over the years. So if you have something that you're looking for yourself, by all means, reach out. It was an Irish customer of our own that had watermarking added to the Sovelia Vault quite recently as well. So it just, all it takes is asking, and we may be able to implement something that you're looking for. And again, it's just stuff like deleting attachment. You could trigger it to delete an attachment on a state change of a file or something like that. Simple stuff, but you know, it just, all it takes is someone needs to ask and we can implement it. And there is a lot of useful functions in here. We'd go through them all when actually training within the application as well. And stuff like our emails, triggers, and so on are built in here as well. Property management, this is just around a simple data card, which I'll show here in the background. You can set up your own data card, which is just the ability to preview file properties that you're going to need to edit for particular files. It's just another means of viewing properties. You can do this in a couple of different ways already within the Vault application, but you can build your own custom data cards with the property management subsection of Sovelia Vault. Down here further, we have access to all of the various log files, our AutoCAD, our Autoloader, our Inventor, our Job Processor, our Sovelia QJob tool, just all of our various log files for just monitoring and errors and so on, if any should occur. Action sets then, which I mentioned when we were going through the presentation, this is just largely where you say, for example, I have an action set under an inventor drawing here. I've only two actions in this. One is to do the 4 eyes check, which is that the approver cannot be the designer, and the second is to create a PDF. So on release of a inventor drawing, both of these actions will occur. And I could stack 5 or 6 actions in here as well. So these are our action sets. This is where we're kind of enforcing or automating these actions. So from the user perspective, quite simple. They're just going to be back here in Autodesk Vault. Everything is going to look almost as identical to what they're familiar with. If they right-click on a file, they will find this new Sovelia Vault sub-menu. So I'm going to take this particular sheet metal part, and I'm just going to go to my Generate Files option, and I should have 2 actions in here, which I do. One is the DXF, and one is the step. So it's going to create a DXF and a step file for this particular part. And it's going to save that DXF and step file back into Vault, but it's also going to load that DXF and step file out into a shared network location. So when I click OK on this, what it does is it adds the job to the job queue. So those of you should already be familiar with the job queue. If I just go Tools and Job Queue, I can see I have a new pending job in here with today's time and date on it. And if I can grab my Vault job processor here in the background, it is currently running that task, as we can see. Typically, the Vault job processor is installed on its own dedicated machine, so this is something we'll assist you with setting up and configuring. But after a couple of seconds, this job will be complete, and we'll be able to see the results. So now the job is gone from the job processor. If I refresh my page in Autodesk Vault, you'll see that alongside my IPT, I now have a DXF which is a 2D sheet drawing that you can load into, say, a folding machine or a laser cutting machine. And we have a step file, which is a common 3D file format that can be loaded into very many viewers and different applications. So it's very simple. And just to maybe prove the network side, you'll see the very same file appeared in a folder which is named after the part number. So if I take this file name 0028, scroll down, I'll find the part number for this is this value here, and I'll find that out in my network folder location, I've now been created a folder as in from today. 1 minute ago, this folder was created and the DXF and the step file were loaded into this particular folder. So yeah, that's kind of the key. We're actually coming right up on the hour. I thought it would get done through this a bit quicker. So just before I pass back, ask Ray if there's any questions that we want to go through. Just to mention, we have also stuff like these automatically generated PDFs that can either get loaded back into the vault or loaded out to your shared work folder. And we can apply a plot stamp like the file state across the front and center of the file to ensure that if someone like an engineer on the shop floor has gone and printed a drawing, they need to be aware that this is in the work in progress stage. This is not necessarily an approved drawing. We can apply something like this plot stamp to the PDF or the DXF as well, or the DWF, my apologies. Ray, any questions in the chat you'd like me to go through?
Firstly, Adam, I'd like to congratulate you on a good presentation. Thank you so much for that. Very informative, went through quite a lot. But I'd just like to make the audience aware that that's only the tip of the iceberg. Really what we can do with Sovelia Vault is fantastic stuff. I think Adam covered all the critical points and the most common points we would see when we're talking to customers. Our conversations lead to generating secondary file formats, to compliance checks, to release of documents, to release of third-party files. And even Adam's come along to say, well, how do we connect with manufacturing and how we share files into Windows Explorer, but not just Windows Explorer, might add, to all the cloud offerings you may have as well, such as Google Drive, Dropbox, Fusion Teams, for example, BIM 360, the BIM, the ACC, the ACS platforms, how we can publish those. So this is a much wider kind of solution and offering that we can offer. So really, I suppose the purpose and the messaging around this particular webinar this morning is that we can cater for a lot of things. We can do a lot more with our PDM solution as well, so we can advance it more to fulfill more of the business requirements. The objective of Sovelia Vault really is to look at the business requirements. Autodesk Vault, or any PDM solution for that matter, really, I suppose, is, as I said at the start, really is one part of the puzzle. We really got to understand how we work with other business areas. So you can imagine how Sovelia Vault will work, and also be the connecting tool between other systems such as ERP and MRP, and other CRM solutions as well that might be requested that we connect to. Adam mentioned about D2M3, which is basically another connector that kind of allows us to connect to other PLM solutions, which is product lifecycle management. So we really are focusing on the business requirements and not just pinpointing to our engineering data. And that's key with all this messaging here that we have this morning. Adam, you did a fantastic job in the presentation, as I said again. As I said, we've experience with implementing the product. We've experienced now where our customers are benefiting from this product and what it offers and how it extends their particular workflow. So it's been absolutely fantastic news, and we really want to grow our customer base with this product because we know that the offering is quite solid and stable. The other thing I might add as well, and one thing that I suppose that we didn't have before, was that we're involved in the steering committee of this particular product as well. So our feedback from our customers is fed directly back to the development team. And for example, watermarking came as one of the requests from one of our customers, and that's actually been worked and discussed with the team and been added to the product. So we have that flexibility. So customer feedback and input to the product is critical for us, and in order to grow. This product is on a roadmap to grow and develop with the customer base. So a lot of exciting things coming, and a lot of exciting things happening, and a lot of releases coming of this product as well. So I'm really looking forward to having these discussions with you, with you going forward. And I think, Adam, I think you probably share the same thought process on that.
For sure. Certainly agree.
I would also like to thank, there's been a few people in the background here from sales, Jacqueline, from Orla, and Elaine in marketing. I know Adam's put a lot of work into this particular presentation. This is his first webinar, and the first of many webinars we're going to host on Sovelia Vault. We do plan to show more, maybe delving into a bit more detail in specific areas in the product as well. So that plan is in place, and I'm really looking forward and excited about that as well. So I would like to thank everybody involved in this webinar. We're close to the hour. That goes down to Jacqueline again, to Orla, to Elaine, to Adam. For me, my small input, these people behind this webinar today have done all the work. I just jumped in and took some bit of the glory, so I can, on the introduction. So I'm absolutely delighted for the team. It's fantastic here. So, and we have a big drive on behind this product as well. So, as always, please feel free to contact Adam, contact sales, contact myself if you have any questions this video. We'll be glad to address them. And even hold, as Adam suggested, even have some technical presentations or some demonstrations to you as well in your own time. So Adam, I did jump those out. All right.
Yeah, that's all for now. That's all for folks. Thanks very much. Enjoy the rest of your day, and hopefully we'll all speak again soon.